You see, it's a little tricky because most of us are operating under the materialistic paradigm, sort of the scientific paradigm. And under this paradigm, we just assume that reality is neutral, right? Like atoms aren't good or bad, they're just neutral, right? And good is it's sort of like an unscientific concept, you might say. Like if I try to tell a scientist that the ultimate nature of reality is absolute goodness, the scientist will say, no, that's just some hippie nonsense. That just sounds good to you, Leo. That's like some wishful thinking, bro. Like you've been smoking too much weed or something. But I mean, this is not some sort of tangible, quantifiable, formalizable thing like some equation. So there's that kind of bias there. But notice, again, this is one of those metaphysical, tricky, sneaky metaphysical assumptions, hidden assumptions of science, is that reality must be neutral. And that if you think that reality is good, somehow you must be crazy. And then as the objection goes, well, Leo, if reality can be absolutely good, then what about absolute evil? Shouldn't it also be absolutely evil to balance it out? Well, it turns out not to be the case. And I'll explain why in a minute. And even under some Buddhist conceptions of reality and Advaitin conceptions of reality, there's also sort of this assumption that consciousness must just be neutral, not good. Well, there is such a thing as absolute goodness. I've become directly conscious of it for myself. You can as well. There's nothing particularly special about me in this regard. So what you can become directly conscious of is that physical reality is the material realization of absolute good. Physical reality, all of it, the physical universe as you know it, is the very embodiment of absolute good. It's not neutral. It's absolute good. Why? You might wonder, how can this possibly be the case? Sounds kind of crazy, sounds kind of loony. Why would reality be good and not neutral? Well, consider that all of the stuff that you consider bad is actually just a consequence of the way that you judge reality. I mean, that's literally what bad is. It's a judgment that you project onto reality. Can you see that? A lot of people can't see this. They think that bad is somehow baked into the physical structure of reality. As though like theft is actually bad, or murder is actually bad, or genocide is actually bad. But if you're truly unbiased in the way that you look at reality, you can kind of step back from the situation. You can see that actually it's not bad. The badness that is there is something I'm projecting into it because it's bad for me. It's bad from my point of view. It's bad because I have various sorts of attachments to how life should unfold. I believe there shouldn't be theft. I believe there shouldn't be rape. I believe there shouldn't be murder. And of course, why do I believe these things? Not because they're absolutely bad. I believe these things because all these things are threatening to my own survival. Pretty obvious, right? But then you might wonder, here's where it gets kind of tricky, because you might then think, okay, well, Leo, if that's true, then shouldn't goodness just also work in the same way? That goodness is just also a projection of the human mind. And it's also just, from a certain point of view, like maybe you think that, I don't know what, sex is good, children are good, pleasure is good, food is good, the kind that you like. I mean, whatever you think is good. Being nice to people, you might say, is good. Charity is good. Giving donations to the hungry is good. These sorts of things. And you might say, well, Leo, isn't that all a projection of, again, this sort of biased mind? And you're right, it is. Those are projections. Because you're selecting certain things to be good relative to other things which are not good. So, giving donations to children you think is good, whereas abusing children you think is bad. So here we're dealing with good as a lowercase g good, relative good. And this is a projection of the human mind. But then what people don't realize is that there is absolute good. Absolute good transcends and includes both of the relative good and bad. So in a sense, what happens is that your consciousness expands and becomes so holistic and so integrated that you gain enough meta-awareness to realize that, yes, the bad stuff is just a projection of a biased mind for survival purposes. Yes, the lowercase g good stuff is also a projection of the selfish, biased mind for survival purposes, because usually what the ego calls lowercase g good is simply that which serves the ego. So you're clear about that, but then what happens is that you break through to a meta-consciousness of the entire dynamic as a whole, all of reality as a whole, and you see that from that ultimate absolute point of view, it's all absolute good. Good with a uppercase G. And here you realize that good is not just some human thing. Good is a deep existential facet of ultimate truth, of what consciousness is. Consciousness is goodness. And consciousness is all that there is, as we've talked about many times before. We've talked about how reality is one. We've talked about how it's infinity. Infinity can only be one. And the nature of consciousness is good. And everything else is just a subset of that. Everything else serves the ultimate good. So why would reality itself and consciousness itself be the ultimate good? Think about it. If you had unlimited power to create any kind of reality that you could create, of all the possible ones that you could create, what kind would you create that would be the highest good out of all the possible ones? The answer is you would give an infinite number of beings the opportunity to experience and discover the infinite goodness of consciousness for themselves. That would be the ultimate good, is if you created a reality like that. And here we are. We are in that reality. Now you say, but Leo, isn't that circular? So you're saying that the ultimate good is to create a reality for other beings, of which there's an infinite number of different ones, to realize the goodness of reality? That's very tautological. That's like a recursive definition of goodness, because you're using goodness within the definition of goodness. Yes, exactly. That's not a bug, that's a feature. You see, because since reality is a singularity, an infinite singularity, since it is one, there is only one reality and can only ever be one reality, that one reality has to be at the ultimate absolute level, has to be its own source and its own end, its own goal and its own point. So what is the point of reality, you might say? Well, the point of reality is, of course, just itself. And what is the point of goodness? The point of goodness is itself. Goodness is the one thing that is its own reward. See, you don't do good things to get something else. You do other things to reach the good. Like money by itself is not good, because you can use money for all sorts of bad stuff. But goodness is good in and of itself. That's the special property of goodness that allows it to hold this absolute position amongst everything else. So imagine, if you will, an entire universe in which nothing but good existed. Why wouldn't God create such a universe if God had infinite power? Well, of course, that's exactly what God would do. Now you wonder, well, why didn't God do that? But of course God did. Here we are. Ta-da! This is it. You're sitting inside of it. You are it. This is absolute good. What this means is it's not possible for there to be a universe that's any better than the one that exists. This is the ultimate one.